Hi everyone. For all you research students and researchers who sometimes stress about applying for ethics and it takes a long time for the ethics application to go through, here is a good news for you. Please check with your university as well. But the university where I work in, they have provided a provision for applying for an ethics exemption provided you meet some of the criteria. Now, of course, the official document sent to us researchers was very long, but I'm just summarizing to you guys the conditions under which you may also be allowed to apply for an ethics exemption. This doesn't mean that you don't apply for ethics altogether. This means that you reach out to the ethics department and explain your research design, and if it satisfies the criteria that they have to exempt your research from applying for a full ethics application, whether it is minimum risk or whether it's full risk application, then you can be granted an ethics exemption. So you still apply for ethics, but it is not as stringent, as strict. It is mainly you explaining to the research ethics committee as to how your research ticks off the boxes that they have listed under the exemption criteria. So then they will issue you an ethics exemption certificate, which you can then use to go ahead and collect your data and conduct your research, provided you stick to those requirements that they have outlined and you are ethical about it. So let me give you some examples as to how you can get ethics exemption. So one of the very obvious examples is that if you are collecting data purely by sending out a survey or by the observation of people, where these observations or the survey is not causing anybody any distress. So for example, if you are carrying out a survey about the water quality in that area, then it is not causing anybody any distress. But if you are sending out a survey regarding a person's experience with sexual abuse at a young age, or domestic abuse, or any kind of other abuse which makes that person uncomfortable in answering the survey questionnaire, then they might consider it to be distress to the participant. So even when you're sending out a survey questionnaire, think about whether this kind of survey questionnaire tries to gather any personal information which may cause distress. If it does not, then you can get an ethics exemption. The other condition is that if you are observing people and these observations are not causing any distress to anybody, it's not making anybody any uncomfortable. So for example, if you are observing students in a classroom as to how they are behaving, how they are learning, it may cause some discomfort to students who will then be very conscious about being observed, and they will modify their behavior accordingly, or they may get affected where their exams may get affected, the way they are performing the learning activity may get affected. However, if you are observing people in a public scenario, you are sitting in a park and you are observing how children are interacting with community services provided in the park, how they are interacting with the barbecue or water or the public toilets, then it is not causing anybody any distress, especially if you are not recording them visually. You are just recording your observations, you are not carrying out any video recording. Alright, another example could be where you are carrying out research purely for educational and training purposes. So you are trying to teach a PhD student as to how to go about collecting the data, how to follow the ethical procedures, how to manage the participants, but you are not actually going to use any of that data for any public output of research. So no publication, no report, no article that goes out in the public domain. You are purely conducting a research activity for educational and training purposes, as we often do with new PhD students. Sometimes we do ask them to undertake a practice activity, just teaching them how to go about collecting the data, how to divide the class into two groups for control and treatment group, and so on and so forth. So for any educational or training purposes, if you are collecting data or if you are carrying out research, but you are not going to publish that research in any public output or through publications and articles and blogs, then you may apply for an ethics exemption. You may also apply for an ethics exemption if you are using secondary data. So the data which is already available out there in the public domain, it is easily accessible. So you may apply for an ethics exemption because you are using somebody else's data, and that is sufficient for you. You don't need to collect any own personal data. And the another example, or the last example I would like to give, is any kind of research where you are making sure that the research participants are not identifiable by any means, by their name or their address or their face. So then of course you can also apply for ethics exemption. So an example being that, let's say you are planning to conduct an interview. Now instead of carrying out a video interview, you carry out an audio interview. There are many softwares available. You can carry out an audio interview where their face cannot be seen, or where you are not asking them for their name or their address or where they work. So any other details is fine, like age is fine, qualifications is fine, because people cannot identify who the participant is. So any kind of means which allows anyone to identify the research participant, that is cannot be classified under ethics exemption. But any kind of means where you can collect the data and it is not possible for the people reading the data or reading the report to identify the participants, then you can apply for ethics exemption. So make sure that you read up on this. So the place where you are conducting research, they will have their own requirements. Make sure you read the requirements, or reach out to the research ethics committee if you have doubts, and talk about your research. Tell them or explain to them how you can be justified to be granted an exemption. So if you can design your research according to these exemption criteria, it will make your life much easier, and you can reduce a lot of the workload from applying for a full ethics or a minimum risk ethics application. So I hope this video was useful to you. Please let me know through the comments. In the comment section, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and I will see you soon with my next video. Bye for now.